The observation gallery was packed with cadets from 47 different species. They pressed against the reinforced glass, watching the massive crystalline sphere rotate slowly in its electromagnetic field. The Nexus system hummed with power, its quantum processors calculating thousands of scenarios per second. This was the most advanced war simulator in the galaxy, and today, everyone wanted to see the human try to use it. Lieutenant Daeho Kim stood alone in the command chamber below. He was 28 years old, shorter than most of the alien officers with dark hair and tired eyes. He had been assigned to the Galactic Defense Forces 6 months ago, and this was his final test at the War Academy on Station Prometheus. The scenario was simple in theory but brutal in practice. Defend Colony Kepler 442 from an invasion force. 40 ships under his command, 200 ships attacking, civilians evacuating, limited ammunition, aging defense platforms that barely worked. The scenario had been tested 10,000 times across every species in the Council. The best survival rate ever achieved was 23%. Most commanders lost everything in the first hour. Commander Velrin clicked her mandibles together as she watched from above. She was an insectoid, old and experienced, with 200 years of military service. She had seen thousands of cadets attempt this scenario. Most panicked. Some gave up. A few managed to save a handful of civilians before the simulation ended in defeat. "Begin simulation," Admiral Torvik announced. He was an avian commander, his feathers gray with age, his voice sharp and clear. The holographic displays blazed to life around Daeho. Ships appeared as glowing markers in three-dimensional space. Red for enemy, blue for friendly, yellow for civilian transports desperately trying to escape the planet. The Nexus immediately began calculating optimal strategies, displaying them on side screens. Suggested formations, recommended firing patterns, probability of success for each action. Daeho ignored them all. His fingers moved across the control interface, giving orders that made the Nexus flash warning symbols. He was splitting his forces in ways that violated every tactical doctrine. He sent 3 destroyers away from the main battle, heading toward an empty asteroid field. The Nexus warned him, "This action reduces defensive capability by 18%. Not recommended." Daeho continued anyway. In the observation gallery, a young woman leaned forward. Cadet Hieri Park was a military intelligence specialist, also human, and she had known Daeho back on Earth. She watched his tactics with interest while the other cadets muttered in confusion. "What is he doing?" a reptilian cadet asked. "He is weakening his own defenses." "I do not understand human strategy," another added. The enemy fleet approached in perfect formation. Their attack pattern was textbook quality, designed by military computers for maximum efficiency. The Nexus calculated their movements and suggested counter-strategies to Daeho. Block their approach with the defense platforms. Create overlapping fields of fire. Maintain formation integrity. Daeho did the opposite. He scattered his ships in patterns that looked random. He pulled his flagship back when he should have advanced. He sent fighters on trajectories that made no tactical sense. The Nexus began flashing more warnings. Current strategy has a 4% survival probability. Recommend returning to standard defensive formation. Daeho touched the screen to dismiss the warning. Commander Velrin's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of her growing agitation. What is this human doing? He is ignoring every suggestion. Does he want to fail? But Hieri was smiling now. She saw something the others did not. Daeho was not following the Nexus because he was not thinking like it. The computer saw optimal paths and calculated probabilities. Daeho saw something else entirely. The battle intensified. Enemy ships opened fire. Daeho's scattered forces looked doomed. The observation gallery watched in silence, expecting to see the quick defeat they had witnessed so many times before. Then something strange happened. The enemy fleet, controlled by the Nexus AI, began making mistakes, small ones at first. A cruiser moved slightly out of position. A destroyer fired at empty space where a human ship had been 3 seconds earlier. The computer was predicting where Daeho's ships would go based on optimal tactics, but Daeho was not using optimal tactics. He was using something the Nexus could not predict. 2 hours into the simulation, Daeho sent his flagship on what appeared to be a suicide charge directly at the enemy's main line. The Nexus screamed warnings. "This maneuver has a 97% chance of ship destruction. Abort immediately. Deho did not abort. His flagship raced forward, taking heavy fire. Shields failing. Hull breaching. Any moment now it would be destroyed. At the last second, he pulled up and over, using the enemy's own formation as cover. His ship weaved between their vessels while they tried desperately not to shoot each other. In that moment of chaos, his scattered forces struck from 6 different directions simultaneously. The Nexus had not predicted this. Could not predict this. The maneuver was mathematically unsound, tactically foolish, and completely irrational. It worked perfectly. 3 enemy cruisers exploded before they could react. The attack formation broke apart in confusion. Commander Velrin stood up from her seat. Impossible.
How did he calculate that timing?
He did not calculate, Harry said quietly. He felt it. The simulation continued. Deho kept making moves that the Nexus flagged as errors. He crashed a destroyer into an asteroid not to destroy himself, but to use the gravity to slingshot around and attack from an unexpected angle. He fired weapons late by computer standards but perfectly timed for where enemy ships would actually be. He ignored optimal firing solutions and trusted something else entirely. And the Nexus began struggling to keep up. Warning lights appeared on the instructor's console. Velrin looked down in disbelief. The system is having processing difficulties. That should not be possible. Admiral Torvik leaned forward, his sharp eyes fixed on the human below. Continue simulation. 3 hours in, the impossible happened. The Nexus froze. Error messages cascaded across every display in the chamber. The massive crystalline sphere flickered. The simulation did not crash exactly, but it entered a state the programmers called paradox lock. The quantum computers were trying to calculate probability matrices for actions that should not work, trying to predict movements that followed no pattern, trying to optimize responses to chaos itself. The Nexus had reached its limit. In 500 years of operation, this had never happened. Commanders had failed the scenario. Some had performed brilliantly, but no one had ever broken the simulation itself. Deho stood in the center of the frozen chamber, surrounded by glitching holographic displays. He looked up at the observation gallery, his face calm, his voice steady. I need manual mode. The computer cannot keep up. The gallery fell absolutely silent. Manual mode had not been activated in 200 years. It meant controlling everything directly without any computer assistance. No AI calculating firing solutions. No predictive algorithms showing optimal paths. No safety nets or automated systems. Just raw sensor data, manual controls, and human instinct. It meant flying and fighting the way ancient pilots did before automation, before computers made warfare precise and predictable. Admiral Torvik's feathers ruffled. He looked at Commander Velrin, who stood frozen in shock. Around them, cadets from dozens of species whispered in their various languages. The humans wanted manual mode. They wanted to turn off the machines and do it themselves. In the stillness, Admiral Torvik made his decision. His voice carried across the chamber, clear and commanding. Manual mode approved. Reset the simulation. Disengage all AI assistance. Let us see what humans do when the machines stop thinking for them. The Nexus began to reboot. This time, when it came back online, it would only observe. It would not help. It would not suggest. It would not calculate optimal strategies. This time, Deho would face the invasion alone, with nothing but his own mind, his own hands, and his own instincts. The other species watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. They all relied on computers to enhance their tactics, to make warfare logical and systematic. The idea of fighting manually seemed primitive, even dangerous. But as Hieri watched Deho prepare for the second attempt, she remembered something from their childhood. Deho had spent thousands of hours playing ancient video games, simulations from old Earth before AI assistance became standard. Games where millisecond reactions mattered, games where computers did not hold your hand, games that required you to think fast, move faster, and trust your instincts above all else. The galaxy was about to learn something about humanity. They thought differently not because they were smarter, but because their evolution had been chaotic. They came from a world of unpredictable predators, random disasters, and constant change. They learned to handle uncertainty not by calculating it away, but by embracing it. The simulation chamber glowed as it prepared to restart. Deho stretched his fingers, rolled his shoulders, and smiled slightly. He had broken the Nexus by being unpredictable. Now he would show them what happened when a human truly let go of the rules and fought on instinct alone. The real test was about to begin. The lights in the command chamber dimmed and then blazed back to life. The holographic displays changed completely. Gone were the smooth, helpful interfaces with their calculated predictions and optimal solutions. In their place appeared crude manual controls, the kind that emergency pilots trained on but rarely used. Raw sensor data scrolled across screens in endless streams of numbers. No friendly arrows showing where to go. No helpful warnings about enemy positions. Just information, cold and unfiltered, waiting for a human mind to make sense of it. Deho placed his hands on the manual control interface. It felt different from the automated system. Each movement required his direct input. Every ship needed individual commands. There were no formation assist programs, no automated evasion patterns, no computer-calculated firing solutions. This was warfare stripped down to its most basic elements. In the observation gallery, the other cadets pressed closer to the glass. Most of them had never seen anyone use manual mode. Their species had evolved past such primitive methods centuries ago. Why use your own limited brain when computers could calculate thousands of possibilities per second? Why trust instinct when mathematics could show you the optimal choice? But Hieri understood. She had watched Deho play those ancient games back on Earth. Games that existed before helpful AI. Games where you controlled everything yourself, where success depended on reflexes and intuition, rather than following suggested strategies. Games that trained your mind to see patterns in chaos and react faster than thought. Simulation restart in 10 seconds, Admiral Torvik announced. Commander Velrin settled back into her seat, her mandibles still clicking with uncertainty. She had commanded fleets for 2 centuries. She had used the Nexus for tactical training for longer than most species in the gallery had been alive. The idea of shutting it all off and relying on manual control seemed insane. The countdown reached 0. The simulation began again. The enemy fleet appeared 200 ships strong, approaching in perfect formation. Their attack pattern was textbook military doctrine, the kind taught to every commander in the galaxy. 3-pronged assault, overlapping fields of fire, systematic advancement, beautiful in its precision. Deho's 40 ships waited. No helpful suggestions appeared on his screens. No optimal positioning guides. Just his ships, his weapons, and his decisions. His fingers moved. The fleet broke apart in a pattern that made several cadets gasp. Ships scattered in directions that seemed random. 3 destroyers headed for the asteroid field again, but faster this time, accelerating beyond recommended safety limits. The flagship pulled back, exposing the colony to attack. Fighters spread out in a formation that had no name in any tactical manual. "He is doing it again," a reptilian cadet muttered. "The same mistakes?" "No," Hieri said softly. "Not mistakes, watch." The enemy fleet adjusted its approach, moving to exploit the gaps in Deho's formation. The AI controlling them calculated the optimal attack vectors and moved with mechanical precision. They would sweep through the scattered human forces and destroy them piece by piece. That was when the chaos began. Deho sent his lead destroyer on what appeared to be a collision course with a massive asteroid. The ship accelerated, hurtling toward certain destruction. At the last possible moment, it fired thrusters and skimmed along the asteroid's surface, using the gravity to whip around at tremendous speed. The maneuver was dangerous, unorthodox, and completely manual. No computer would have approved it because the margin for error was too small. But Deho's timing was perfect. The destroyer emerged from behind the asteroid at a sharp angle, already firing, catching 3 enemy fighters completely by surprise. They exploded before their sensors registered the threat. Elsewhere in the battlefield, another human frigate seemed to be fleeing. It raced away from the enemy fleet, engines at maximum. The AI calculated pursuit vectors and sent ships to chase it down. They followed the frigate into what looked like empty space. It was not empty. Deho had seeded that area with mines hours earlier in the simulation. During the first phase, when the Nexus was still providing suggestions he ignored, the mines were too old and too slow to be effective in normal combat. Any AI would have detected them easily, but Deho had not activated them earlier. He waited until enemy ships were committed to pursuit, waited until they were moving too fast to stop. Then he triggered the mines manually, timing the detonations not based on computer calculations, but on his own judgment of distance and speed. 5 enemy destroyers vanished in overlapping explosions. In the observation gallery, silence fell. The cadets watched in disbelief as the human manually orchestrated a battle that should have been impossible to coordinate. He was tracking 40 ships and 200 enemy vessels in his head, making decisions faster than some species could breathe. How is his reaction speed so fast? An insectoid cadet asked. His brain should not be able to process all this data. Hieri smiled. He is not processing it. He is feeling it. There is a difference. The battle intensified. Enemy ships adapted, trying new approaches. But Deho adapted faster. His flagship charged forward suddenly, breaking from cover, all weapons firing. It looked like a desperate attack, doomed to fail. The enemy fleet concentrated fire on it, exactly as their tactical programming dictated. Meanwhile, unnoticed, Deho's fighters had been slowly drifting into position. Not moving, just drifting on momentum. Systems powered down to minimal levels to avoid detection. They looked like debris on enemy sensors, pieces of destroyed ships floating through space. When the enemy fleet focused on the flagship, the fighters powered up simultaneously and struck from 6 different angles. They fired at point-blank range into the enemy's rear formations. Cruisers exploded. Destroyers lost power. The perfect enemy formation collapsed into chaos, and chaos was where Deho thrived. His ships moved like water, flowing around obstacles, finding gaps, striking and retreating before the enemy could respond. There was no pattern to predict because Deho was not following a pattern. He was improvising moment by moment, trusting his instincts to guide him. He sent ships on collision courses that became last-second evasions. He fired weapons late, but the late timing meant they hit targets exactly where they moved to. He grouped his forces, then scattered them, then regrouped them somewhere else, all without any logical sequence the enemy AI could predict. Commander Velrin stood up from her seat, her mandibles frozen in shock. This should not work. What he is doing violates every principle of space combat. Admiral Torvik's eyes were fixed on the human below, yet it is working. 1 hour into the manual simulation, the tide had clearly turned. Deho had lost 12 ships, but the enemy had lost over 80. The perfect formations were broken. The systematic attack had devolved into desperate attempts to counter moves that made no sense. Hieri watched the macro display that showed the entire battlefield from above. To most observers, it looked like random chaos. But she saw something else. There was a rhythm to Deho's movements, like music played without sheet music. Jazz, her grandmother had called it. Making it up as you go, but making it beautiful. The enemy AI tried to adapt. It started attempting random movements, thinking that unpredictability would counter Deho's unpredictability. But randomness was not the same as chaos. Randomness had no purpose. Deho's chaos had purpose. Every seemingly crazy move served a goal, even if that goal only existed in his intuition. 2 hours in, Deho executed his final maneuver. He gathered his remaining 28 ships into a tight formation and charged directly at the enemy's main battle line. Every screen flashed what would have been warnings if the automated systems were active. This was suicide. This was madness. The enemy fleet prepared to annihilate the human formation. Over 100 ships concentrated their fire on the approaching group. There was no escape. No maneuver could save them. Deho smiled. At the last moment, his ships did not scatter outward as the enemy AI predicted. They scattered inward, diving through a gap that did not exist yet. Deho created the gap by destroying one of his own damaged destroyers, detonating it precisely to create a hole in the enemy's firing pattern. His ships poured through the opening before it closed. They emerged inside the enemy formation, surrounded by enemy ships that could not fire without hitting each other. For 10 seconds of perfect chaos, Deho's forces tore through the enemy fleet from within. Broadside weapons fired at point-blank range. Torpedoes launched into engine cores. Ships rammed into shields at close range, collapsing them. When Deho's forces finally broke free from the enemy formation, the battle was over. The enemy fleet was shattered. The colony was safe. The simulation registered a survival rate of 67%. Deho released the controls and collapsed back in his chair, his face covered in sweat. His hands were shaking from the effort of manual control. Every muscle ached. His head pounded from tracking so many variables without computer assistance. But he had won. The command chamber doors opened and Commander Velrin descended, her movements slow and uncertain. She approached Deho and stared at him for a long moment. How? She finally asked. The chaos. There was no strategy, no pattern, no logic. Deho looked up at her, exhausted but grinning. That was the strategy. The enemy AI was trying to predict optimal tactics. I gave it chaos instead. Chaos has no optimal solution. But your species' brain is limited compared to quantum computers, Velrin insisted. You cannot calculate faster than the Nexus. I was not calculating, Deho said. I was playing. In the observation gallery, Admiral Torvik nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand something profound about humans. They had learned warfare not through cold calculation but through play, through games that required improvisation and instinct. They trained their minds differently, preparing for uncertainty rather than trying to eliminate it. The other species watched the human cadet with new eyes. Fear and fascination mixed together. If one human could do this, what could a whole fleet of them accomplish? The galaxy was about to find out. 3 days after Deho broke the simulation, the Galactic Military Council convened an emergency session. The enormous chamber at the center of Station Prometheus could hold representatives from all 47 species in the council. Today, every seat was filled. The council chamber was ancient, built when the Alliance was first formed over 1,000 years ago. Its walls displayed star maps showing the territories of every member species. At the center floated a holographic display that could show anything the council needed to see. Right now, it showed the recording of Deho's manual mode victory. Councillor Thane stood at the speaker's position. He was reptilian, covered in dark green scales that had hardened over 300 years of life. He had been a military strategist longer than most species in the room had existed as spacefaring civilizations. His voice carried weight and authority. "We face a problem," Thane began. "The human problem." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with interest. 3 days ago, a single human officer broke the Nexus system, Thane continued. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology. He broke it by thinking wrong. The holographic display showed key moments from Deho's simulation, ships moving in patterns that violated mathematical principles, maneuvers that should have failed but succeeded, tactics that no computer would approve because they made no logical sense. Our military doctrine across the galaxy is built on optimization, Thane said. We calculate the best approach, the optimal formation, the most efficient use of resources. We have done this for centuries. It works because the universe follows mathematical rules. Physics, probability, game theory, all can be calculated. He paused, his reptilian eyes scanning the chamber. Humans do not calculate. They improvise. They take risks that computers classify as foolish. They succeed through methods our AIs cannot predict, because those methods should not work. Ambassador Jiho Han rose from the human delegation section. He was older than Deho, in his 50s, with gray hair and a calm demeanor. He had represented humanity in the Galactic Council for 10 years, navigating the complex politics of dozens of alien species. Councillor Thane makes it sound like a flaw, Jiho said, as if thinking differently is a problem to be solved. It is a problem when it breaks our systems, Thane replied. The Nexus cost billions of credits and took 50 years to build. It trains every officer in the galaxy. One human crashed it in 3 hours. He did not crash it, Jiho corrected. He exceeded its parameters. There is a difference. Another counselor rose, an insectoid named Krell. The ambassador makes light of serious concerns. If humans can break our simulators, what happens in real combat? What happens when human unpredictability affects coordinated fleet operations? What happens when other species cannot predict human actions any better than our computers can? The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species agreed with Krell. Others defended humanity. The noise grew until Admiral Torvik raised his wing, calling for silence. These are valid concerns, Torvik said. I watched Lieutenant Kim's performance personally. What he did was remarkable. It was also completely incompatible with standard military doctrine. We need to understand why. A new figure entered the discussion area. Dr. Mireille Choi was a human cognitive specialist, brought to the station specifically to explain her species' unusual thinking patterns. She was young, barely 30, but her research into human evolution and cognition had earned respect across the scientific community. I can explain, Mireille said, but you may not like the answer. She activated her own data display. It showed evolutionary trees, environmental data, and neurological scans. Most species in this council evolved in relatively stable environments. Your predators were consistent. Your climates were predictable. Your ecosystems reached equilibrium and stayed there for millions of years. The display shifted to show Earth, a planet of violent weather patterns, shifting continents, ice ages appearing and disappearing. Earth was chaos. Our predators changed constantly. Our climate swung wildly between extremes. Mass extinctions happened regularly. Nothing stayed stable. What does this have to do with military tactics? Krell demanded. Everything, Mireille replied. Your species evolved to optimize because optimization worked in stable environments. Humans evolved to improvise because improvisation was necessary for survival. We developed brains that handle uncertainty not by calculating it away but by embracing it. She pulled up neurological data. When a human faces an unpredictable situation, specific neural pathways activate. Pattern recognition, rapid decision-making, risk assessment that factors in gut feelings and instinct. We do not calculate optimal solutions. We feel our way through chaos. Feelings are not reliable, Thane said. Mathematics is reliable. Mathematics is reliable in predictable systems, Mireille countered. Combat is not predictable. The moment battle begins, plans fail. Variables change. Chaos emerges. Most species respond by trying to recalculate, to find the new optimal solution. Humans respond by adapting in real time without needing to calculate first. Hieri had been invited to the council session as a witness to Deho's performance. She stood now, adding her perspective. I would like to show you something. She activated a historical database and pulled up records from Earth's military history. The Battle of Thermopylae. 300 Spartan soldiers held off an army of thousands for 3 days. Mathematically impossible. They did it anyway. Another record appeared. Hannibal Barca crossing the Alps with war elephants. Every strategic calculation said it was suicide. He succeeded and nearly conquered Rome. More records flickered past. D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. So many things went wrong that any AI would have predicted total failure. Humans adapted, improvised, overcame. They won the battle that changed a war. Ancient history, Krell said dismissively. History that shaped how we think. Yeti replied. Humans have always succeeded by doing the impossible. It is not a bug in our programming. It is the core feature. Counselor Thane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. I begin to understand. You are not saying humans are better at warfare. You are saying humans are incompatible with our systems because your warfare is fundamentally different. Exactly, Ambassador Jiho said. Then we have a serious question before us, Thane continued. Can human tactics be integrated into the Galactic Defense Forces? Or will human unpredictability cause more problems than it solves? The chamber fell silent. This was the real question. The one that would determine humanity's role in the galaxy's military future. Were humans assets or liabilities? Admiral Torvik spread his wings, a gesture that commanded attention. I propose a definitive test. We put Lieutenant Kim against the Nexus in unrestricted combat simulation. Not a training scenario. A real battle simulation with the AI controlling the opposing force. No limits, no safety protocols. No restrictions. What would this prove? Someone asked. If Kim wins, we acknowledge that human tactical doctrine has value and begin integrating it into our forces. If he loses, humans accept standard training and abandon their chaos theory approach to warfare. The proposal sent ripples through the chamber. It was a high-stakes gamble. The reputation of an entire species riding on one simulation. This is acceptable to the human delegation, Ambassador Jiho said after a moment. But we have one condition. Name it, Thane said. Lieutenant Kim chooses his crew. Of course. We can assign him the finest officers from across the galaxy. No, Jiho said firmly. He chooses humans, and he chooses them himself. Krell laughed, a clicking sound. You want an all-human crew? That limits your advantages. Surely mixed species coordination would be better? Hieri smiled slightly. You have not been listening. Human advantages come from being human. We work best with others who think like us. Thane considered this. Very well. Kim may select his own crew, all human if he wishes, but understand the stakes. This simulation will be observed by every military academy in the galaxy. It will determine how humanity is viewed by the Council. If you lose, it could limit human roles in the defense forces for generations. We understand, Jiho said. When do we begin? Give Kim 2 weeks to assemble his team and train, Admiral Torvik said. Then we hold the simulation. One human crew against the full power of the Nexus controlling an unlimited fleet. The council agreed. The decision was made. After the session ended, Hieri found Dr. Mirai in one of the station's observation lounges. They stood together, looking out at the stars. "Do you think we can win?" Hieri asked. Mirai was quiet for a moment. "I think we can do what we always do. Something impossible that somehow works. That is not very scientific." "No," Mirai agreed, "but it is very human." Across the station in his quarters, Deho received notification of the council's decision. He read through the terms and conditions. 1 crew, 2 weeks to prepare. The most important simulation in human history. He sat down at his desk and began making a list. Not of military officers. Not of decorated veterans or tactical geniuses. He wrote down names of people the military would never consider. People who had never fired a weapon in real combat. People who learned warfare not from war but from something else entirely. He wrote down the names of gamers. The galaxy wanted to test human chaos theory. He would show them what humans who truly mastered chaos could do. He would build a crew not from military academies but from gaming tournaments. Not from people taught to optimize but from people who learned to improvise in digital battlefields, where adaptation meant the difference between victory and defeat. The Nexus would face the full force of human unpredictability. Not diluted by military training. Not tempered by standard doctrine. Pure, unfiltered human chaos refined through 10,000 hours of competitive play. Deho smiled as he finished his list. The galaxy thought it understood the human problem. They had seen only the smallest glimpse. In 2 weeks, they would see what happened when humanity truly let loose. He sent the first message to a young woman in Seoul who held championship records in stealth games. Her in-game name was Ghost, and she could make entire fleets disappear. The crew of chaos was about to assemble. Daiho returned to Earth for the first time in 3 years. The transport ship descended through the atmosphere toward Seoul, and he watched the city lights spread below him like a galaxy made of electricity. Somewhere down there were the people he needed, not in military bases or tactical academies. In gaming arenas and tournament halls, his first stop was the Seoul Esports Stadium, a massive structure that could hold 20,000 spectators. Tonight was the finals of the National Stealth Games Championship. Deho bought a ticket and found a seat in the upper levels where he could watch without being noticed. The arena darkened. Spotlights focused on 2 players sitting in isolation pods on the main stage. On the enormous screens above them, the game began. It was a simulation of corporate espionage. 1 player attacking a secure facility while the other defended it. The crowd watched in breathless silence. 1 player was Jiwon Lee, 22 years old, competing under the name Ghost. Daiho watched her play with complete focus. Her character moved through the digital environment like smoke, appearing and disappearing, never quite where the defending player expected. She had infinite patience, waiting minutes without moving if necessary, then striking in the half-second when her opponent looked away. She won the championship without her character ever being spotted. Perfect stealth. The crowd erupted in applause. After the tournament, Deho waited outside the competitor's entrance. Jiwon emerged wearing a black hoodie, headphones around her neck, looking tired but satisfied. She was quiet and small, easy to overlook in a crowd. "Jiwon Lee?" Deho asked. She looked at him with cautious eyes. "Yes? My name is Deho Kim. I am a lieutenant in the Galactic Defense Forces. I need to ask you something unusual." "I do not join the military," she said immediately, moving to walk past him. "I am not recruiting you for the military," Daiho said. "I am recruiting you for a game." "The most important game ever played." She stopped. "What kind of game?" "The kind where millions of lives might depend on whether we win." Jiwon turned back, studying him. "Tell me more." 2 days later, Deho stood in an underground gaming club in Busan. The air smelled like energy drinks and instant noodles. Dozens of gaming stations lined the walls. Players hunched over keyboards and controllers. In the center area, a crowd had gathered around 2 players competing in a fighting game. One was Taehyung Kang, age 25, known in the gaming community as Berserker. Deho watched him play. His reflexes were extraordinary, his attacks aggressive and relentless. But more than speed, Taehyung had something else, the ability to read his opponent. He anticipated moves before they happened, countered attacks that had not started yet. His playstyle looked reckless but was actually deeply intuitive. Tae-hyung won 7 matches in a row before anyone could take a single round from him. He stood up, grinning, accepting the small prize money from the club owner. "You are very good," Daeho said, approaching him. Tae-hyung sized him up. "You want to play?" "Not this game. A different one." "I am expensive," Tae-hyung said with a smile. "Whatever you are selling, I probably cannot afford it." "I am not selling anything. I am offering you a chance to test your skills against something that has never been beaten." "Interested?" Tae-hyung's smile widened. "Always." The third recruit was Sumin Shin, age 27, the youngest person to ever win the Grand Strategy Championship at age 16. Daeho found her in a small apartment in Incheon, surrounded by screens showing different strategy games running simultaneously. She was playing all of them at once, tracking 50 different variables across multiple games without breaking focus. "Sumin?" Daeho asked after she let him in. "You are the lieutenant everyone is talking about," she said without looking away from her screens. "The one who broke the war simulator." News travels fast. In gaming communities faster than you think. "You are recruiting a team. You already have Ghost and Berserker. Now you want me. How did you know?" "Because I would do the same thing. You need someone who can track everything at once, who can see the big picture while others focus on details. That is what I do." She finally turned to face him. "But I have a question first. Why gamers? Why not real soldiers?" "Because real soldiers are trained to think a certain way, to follow doctrine, to use optimal strategies. I need people who are trained to break systems and find advantages that should not exist. Gamers do that better than anyone." Sumin considered this. "When do we start?" The fourth recruit was found in a speedrunning tournament in Daegu. Yuna Nam, age 24, held world records in 3 different games for completing them in impossible times. She found glitches and exploits that developers did not know existed. She could break any system given enough time. "You want me to break a military simulator?" Yuna asked after Daeho explained his offer. She was bouncing on her heels with energy, unable to stand still. "Among other things. Can I try things that are technically against the rules? There are no rules in this simulation except survive and win." Her eyes lit up. "I am absolutely in." The fifth recruit was Minho Song, age 29, different from the others. He had served in the Earth Defense Forces before retiring to compete in tactical shooter tournaments. He understood both military thinking and gaming mentality. He was a defensive specialist who had never lost a competition where he was tasked with holding a position. "You want me to be the anchor?" Minho said when Daeho found him at a shooting range in Gwangju. "You understand quickly. Berserker will be aggressive. Ghost will be invisible, Sumin will coordinate, Yuna will exploit. Someone needs to hold the center and refuse to break. That is my specialty. Will you do it?" Minho checked his rifle, put it away and nodded. "For a challenge like this?" "Yes." The final recruit was Sora Bay, age 23, Battle Royale champion. She had won tournaments where 100 players competed simultaneously in chaotic free-for-all combat. She thrived in situations with maximum variables and minimum predictability. In chaos, she was unstoppable. "You saved me for last," Sora said when Daeho approached her at a tournament in Jeju Island. "I wanted to see if you would win first. And I did." She smiled. "So what do I get?" "A chance to prove that chaos beats order." "My favorite kind of game." 1 week after recruitment began, all 7 gamers assembled at an isolated training facility in the Korean mountains. Admiral Torvik arrived to observe, accompanied by Commander Velrin and a delegation of alien officers. They wanted to see the human crew that would face the Nexus. What they saw did not inspire confidence. Tae-hyung arrived wearing a tournament jersey and eating instant ramen. Yuna would not stop making jokes and doing silly dances. Sora kept her headphones on during the initial briefing. "They looked like children, not soldiers." "This is your elite crew?" Commander Velrin asked, her mandibles clicking in disbelief. "Yes," Daeho said simply. "They have no military training, no discipline, no experience in real combat. They have something better. 10,000 hours of improvisation training in competitive environments where adaptation is the only way to win." Admiral Torvik said nothing, but his expression showed doubt. Then they ran the first simulation. The crew entered the command pods, each taking control of a different aspect of a small fleet. Daeho assigned roles based on their gaming specialties. Ji-won controlled scouts and stealth ships. Tae-hyung commanded assault forces. Suman managed overall strategy and resource allocation. Yuna analyzed systems for exploits. Minho anchored the defensive positions. Sora handled rapid response in unpredictable situations. The simulation began. A standard military scenario: protect a convoy through hostile space. Within 30 seconds, the alien observers knew something was different. The crew did not communicate like military officers. They used gaming language, calling out positions with quick codes, making decisions without formal discussion. They argued constantly, overriding each other's commands, seeming to work in complete chaos. But they won, easily, without losing a single ship from the convoy. "Run it again," Admiral Torvik said. "Increase difficulty." They ran the simulation 10 times, each time with increased difficulty. The crew won every time, not through perfect execution or optimal tactics. They won through chaos, through improvisation, through exploiting angles that military computers did not think to defend. After the 10th victory, Commander Velrin approached Deho. "I do not understand. They fight each other as much as the enemy. They ignore standard procedures. They take ridiculous risks. They are not a military crew," Deho explained. "They are a gaming squad. Watch how they communicate." Velrin listened carefully to the next simulation. The crew's chatter sounded random at first, but patterns emerged. They had developed their own language through thousands of hours of playing together. A shorthand that let them share information faster than formal military protocols allowed. Enemy flanking left high became left up. I need support in 30 seconds became help 30. Creating distraction so you can attack became look at me. Go now. It was efficient in ways that formal communication never could be. They thought faster, reacted faster, adapted faster, but it only worked because they all spoke the same language, learned through gaming rather than military training. Over the following week, the crew practiced relentlessly. They ran hundreds of scenarios, learning each other's patterns, developing instinctive coordination. They argued and laughed and competed with each other, treating it all like one extended gaming session. The alien observers watched with growing fascination and fear. This was not how military forces trained, but it was undeniably effective. The night before the final simulation, the crew gathered around a campfire outside the training facility. Deho had ordered no technology for the evening, just 8 humans sitting in the dark, talking. "What if we lose?" Suman asked quietly. The others fell silent. They had been treating this like a game, but Suman's question reminded them of the stakes. The reputation of their entire species. The future of humanity and the Galactic Defense Forces. "Then we prove the galaxy was right," Deho said. "That human chaos is just noise without substance. That computers are better than instinct." "Do you believe that?" Jiwan asked. "No, but if we lose, it does not matter what I believe." Yuna threw a stick into the fire. "Have you noticed something about every game we play? The harder the AI tries to beat us, the easier it becomes." "What do you mean?" Minho asked. "AI gets predictable when it tries hard. It optimizes. It calculates. It does what it thinks is best. And that is when we exploit it." Taehyung grinned. "She is right. The Nexus has never played against anything like us." "Because we are weird," Sora added cheerfully. "We are human," Deho corrected. "Tomorrow we show the galaxy what that means." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn. Somewhere above them, the stars glittered. Somewhere among those stars, the Nexus waited. The greatest military AI ever created, ready to face 8 humans who learned warfare through play. The crew of Chaos was ready. Tomorrow the real game would begin. The simulation chamber had been modified for the final test. Instead of one command pod, 8 were arranged in a circle. Each would let one crew member control a portion of the fleet. Massive holographic displays surrounded the circle, visible to the observers packing the galleries above. Every military academy in the galaxy was watching through live feed. Delegates from all 47 species in the council attended in person. This was not just a test anymore. It had become the most watched military event in galactic history. The humans who think wrong versus the machine that thinks perfectly. Admiral Torvik stood at the center observation platform. The scenario is simple. 1 human heavy cruiser, 4 frigates, and 12 fighters. You must defend the colony of New Sol from total destruction. The display shifted to show the enemy force. The gallery fell silent. The Nexus controls 3 dreadnoughts, 20 cruisers, 50 destroyers, and 200 fighters. The objective is complete annihilation of the colony. No negotiations. No surrender. No mercy. Commander Velron's mandibles clicked nervously. This scenario is unwinnable. The force disparity is too great. That is the point, Counselor Thane said from his seat. We want to see what humans do when victory is impossible. The 8 crew members entered the simulation pods. Deho took the command pod in the center. Around him, his crew settled into their positions. Ji-won cracked her knuckles. Taehyung bounced in his seat with nervous energy. Sumin closed her eyes, visualizing the battlefield. Yuna pulled up system diagnostics, already looking for exploits. Minho breathed slowly, centering himself. Sora smiled, headphones on, ready for chaos. Crew check, Deho said. Ghost ready, Ji-won answered. Berserker ready, Taehyung said. Oracle ready, Sumin confirmed. Glitch ready, Yuna called out. Tank ready, Minho stated. Chaos ready, Sora laughed. All right, team, Deho said. Remember what we are here to do? Not to follow optimal tactics. Not to do what the computers expect. We are here to get weird. How weird? Yuna asked. Weird enough to break reality. The crew laughed. In the observation galleries, the alien delegates looked confused. Why were they laughing? They were about to face overwhelming odds. They should be nervous, serious, focused. They did not understand. To the crew, this was not a life-or-death military operation. This was the championship tournament. The final boss. The ultimate game. And they had trained their entire lives for moments like this. Begin simulation, Admiral Torvik announced. The holographic displays exploded with light. The Nexus fleet appeared at the edge of the system, massive and perfect. 3 dreadnoughts led the formation, each one larger than any ship in the human fleet. The attack pattern was beautiful in its precision. 3-pronged assault, overlapping fields of fire, systematic advancement designed to overwhelm any defense. The Nexus calculated that the colony would fall in 47 minutes. Complete destruction would take 12 minutes after that. The human fleet had no chance. But the Nexus had never played against humans who treated warfare like a game. They are coming straight at us, Minho observed. Of course they are, Sumin said. It is the optimal approach. Taehyung, you know what to do. Go in like an idiot? Exactly. Taehyung grinned and sent his assault frigates charging directly at the enemy main line. No evasion, no formation, just full speed ahead. Every tactical computer watching flagged this as suicide. The Nexus adjusted, concentrating fire on the approaching frigates. It was obvious what would happen. They would be destroyed before they got close enough to matter. Meanwhile, unnoticed, Ji-won had taken her entire fighter squadron dark. Power signatures minimized, drifting on momentum alone. To sensors, they looked like debris. She guided them past the enemy fleet, heading for empty space behind their formation. Ghost is in position, she said quietly. Glitch, are we ready? Deho asked. Oh, I am so ready, Yuna said with delight. The Nexus updated its sensor protocols last month. Faster, more efficient, better at everything. Except they introduced a synchronization gap. 0.003 seconds where different sensor types do not talk to each other. How do you use 0.003 of a second? Commander Velron asked from the observation deck. Yuna heard through the open channel and laughed. Watch and learn. She triggered an electromagnetic pulse, carefully calibrated. Not strong enough to do damage. Strong enough to force every sensor in the enemy fleet to recalibrate simultaneously. For 0.003 of a second, the Nexus fleet was blind. Taehyung only needed 2. His frigates, which should have been destroyed by now, suddenly changed vectors. They had been heading toward the main fleet, but in that tiny window of darkness they redirected. They emerged from a debris field the Nexus had calculated as non-threatening, already firing, targeting vulnerable points in the enemy destroyer screen. 6 destroyers exploded before the Nexus even understood what happened. Contact, Taehyung said. Time to dance. What followed was chaos in its purest form. Taehyung engaged the enemy fleet in ways that violated every tactical doctrine. He rammed his frigate's shields against enemy hulls at high speed, not to destroy them but to spin them off course. He fired weapons backward while retreating, using the recoil to accelerate. He piloted manually with reflexes the Nexus could not match. The enemy AI tried to predict his movements and failed. Taehyung was not thinking about what to do next. He was reacting, trusting his instincts, playing the game the way he had played 10,000 matches before. Meanwhile, Sora had engaged 50 enemy fighters in a massive dogfight. She should have been dead instantly. Instead, she thrived. Battle Royale games had taught her to fight while surrounded, to use enemies as shields against each other, to turn chaos into advantage. She dove and weaved through the fighter swarm, never staying in one place, never predictable. The Nexus fighters followed optimal interception patterns, firing calculated solutions. They kept shooting each other while she danced through the crossfire. "Having fun, Chaos?" Deho asked. "Best game ever," Sora replied, laughing as she destroyed 3 more fighters. Suman was coordinating everything from the strategic level, tracking 50 variables in her head simultaneously. She watched the enemy fleet's movements and saw the pattern. The Nexus was adapting, trying to counter the human unpredictability. It was concentrating force where humans were weakest, exploiting the gaps in their chaotic formation. "Tank, they are coming for you," Suman warned. "Let them come," Minho said calmly. 10 enemy cruisers broke from the main formation, heading for Minho's defensive position. He held the center line protecting the colony, and the Nexus had calculated that destroying him would open the path to victory. What the Nexus did not calculate was that Minho had never, in 8 years of competitive gaming, lost a defensive position. Ever. His heavy cruiser became an immovable object. He redirected all power to shields and planted himself in space. The enemy cruisers surrounded him, pouring fire from every direction. His shields flickered, warning lights flashing. Any reasonable commander would retreat. Minho stayed. "Tank is holding," he said through gritted teeth. "I see you, Tank," Suman said. 30 more seconds. Those 30 seconds felt like hours. Minho's shields dropped to critical levels. Hull breaches appeared. Systems failed. But he held his ground, trusting Suman's plan, refusing to yield. At the 29th second, the trap sprung. Those enemy cruisers had rushed to surround Minho, breaking formation, concentrating in one tight area. Suman had predicted this. She had wanted them there. Now they were packed together, overlapping their own firing solutions, unable to maneuver without hitting each other. "Now," Suman commanded. Chiwan's fighter squadron, silent and invisible until this moment, struck from behind. They had been drifting in position for 10 minutes, waiting with perfect patience. Now they fired every missile they had at point-blank range into the clustered enemy cruisers. 5 cruisers exploded instantly. The others scattered in panic, their perfect formation destroyed. "Ghost got them," G1 said simply. The battle had been raging for 20 minutes. The human fleet was damaged but operational. The enemy fleet had lost a third of its force and was losing cohesion. The Nexus was struggling to adapt to tactics that made no sense. In the observation gallery, Counselor Thane leaned forward. "The Nexus is trying to think like them now. It is attempting unpredictable maneuvers." "That will not work," Dr. Miri said from the human delegation. "Randomness is not chaos. The humans are not random. They are improvisational." "There is a difference." Admiral Torvik watched intently. "What is the difference?" "Randomness has no purpose. The crew's chaos has purpose, even if that purpose only exists in their collective instinct. They are telling a story together, and the Nexus cannot understand stories." The Nexus fleet regrouped for its final assault. All remaining ships, all weapons, one massive concentrated strike. It was brutal, overwhelming, mathematically perfect. The human fleet was outnumbered, damaged, low on ammunition. The colony's shields began to fail under the bombardment. "We cannot hold this," Minho said. "Shields at 5%. Deho?" Suman asked. Deho looked at his crew through the communication displays. They were exhausted, their ships falling apart, facing impossible odds. They should surrender. They should accept defeat. But they were gamers. And gamers never gave up before trying one last impossible play. "Remember the tournament finals 3 years ago?" Deho asked. The crew fell silent. They remembered. The tournament where their team was losing badly in the final match. The tournament they won with one insane, impossible strategy that nobody saw coming. "Same play?" Taehyung asked. "Same play," Deho confirmed. "That is crazy," Yuna said. "I love it. What are they planning?" Commander Velrin asked nervously. Nobody answered. Nobody knew except the 8 humans about to do something that would make sense only to them. "On my mark," Deho said. 3, 2, 1, mark. Every human ship simultaneously triggered their reactor cores to overload. Not to explode, but to create a massive electromagnetic pulse. It was a desperate move. shutting down all electronic systems in range. The colony went dark. The defense platforms died. The fighters lost power. And so did the entire Nexus fleet. For 10 seconds, everything was dead in space. No computers, no weapons, no sensors. Just darkness and silence. But 10 seconds before the pulse, the human crew had switched every control to manual mode. Physical switches, visual targeting, direct piloting. In those 10 seconds of darkness, they hunted by instinct alone, using techniques from ancient warfare when computers did not exist. Jiwan fired torpedoes at where she felt targets would be, not where sensors showed them. Taehyung rammed enemy ships in the dark, using momentum and collision physics alone. Minho held his position, firing blindly at calculated vectors based on memory of enemy positions. Sora's fighters used visual targeting, her reflexes fast enough to track and shoot in darkness. Yuna found exploits in the chaos itself, using the pulse's electromagnetic interference to blind enemy ships longer than her own. Sumin coordinated everything through voice alone, tracking the battle in her mind, calling out positions from memory. 10 seconds of darkness. 10 seconds of pure human instinct against perfect computer logic that suddenly could not compute anything. When systems rebooted, the battle was over. The Nexus dreadnoughts were hulked, their reactors breached. The cruisers spun helplessly, engines destroyed. The destroyer line was shattered. The fighter screen was gone. The human ships were barely functional, held together by determination and luck. But they were operational. The colony was safe. Victory. The simulation chamber opened. The crew stumbled out of their pods, completely exhausted. They collapsed on the floor, lying there, staring at the ceiling, too tired to celebrate. The observation galleries were absolutely silent. Representatives from 47 species had just witnessed 8 humans defeat the greatest military AI ever created, using tactics that should not work. Finally, slowly, the applause began, started by Admiral Torvik, spreading through the galleries. Not just human observers, but aliens from across the galaxy, acknowledging something they had never seen before. Counselor Thane descended from his observation platform. He looked at the 8 humans sprawled on the floor like exhausted children after a long day of playing. "How?" he asked. "How did you coordinate in the darkness? How did you know where to fire? How did you win when mathematics said it was impossible?" Deho sat up slowly, every muscle aching. "We did not calculate, we played." "There is a difference." "Explain." "The Nexus was trying to win. We were trying to not lose." "Sounds similar, but it is not. The Nexus executed perfect tactics to achieve victory. We just refused to accept perfect defeat. We adapted, improvised, survived, second by second, moment by moment, not following a plan, telling a story we all understood." Thane was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke formally. "Humanity's tactical doctrine is hereby recognized by the Galactic Council. Your chaos theory approach to warfare is validated. The defense forces will begin integration protocols immediately." The galleries erupted in discussion. Some species were excited. Others remained skeptical. But the decision was made. Humanity had proven its value. 6 months later, the Galactic Defense Forces established the Human Tactical Integration Program, not to teach other species to think like humans, but to teach them to work alongside humans, to understand that chaos was not always a problem to solve, but sometimes a tool to wield. Deho's crew became instructors. 8 gamers teaching the galaxy's finest officers that sometimes the best tactics came not from calculation, but from instinct. That sometimes winning meant breaking every rule and trusting your team to understand what you were doing. Without explanation, the Nexus remained the finest tactical computer ever created. But now, in every military academy, a new saying appeared in every language across the galaxy. When the simulator reaches its limit, ask for manual mode. That is when humans wake up. And on Earth, in gaming tournaments and competitions, young players trained and competed. Some of them would someday join the defense forces. Some would face real battles in space. They did not know it yet, but their gaming skills were preparing them for a future where chaos would need to be fought with chaos. Humanity had learned warfare not from war but from play. They learned to improvise by playing games where adaptation was survival. They learned to coordinate through competition where trust meant victory. The galaxy had millions of species who thought logically, who calculated optimally, who followed mathematical principles of warfare. They had one species who thought wrong in ways that worked, and sometimes in the chaos of real combat where plans failed and probability meant nothing, that was exactly what was needed. The war simulator had reached its limit. The humans asked for manual mode, and the galaxy learned that sometimes the impossible just needed people crazy enough to try.